Hi, husbands.
Hi, husbands.
How are you? Are you ready for our next interview? Our next interview is with Kevin and Phil, the Adventuring Dads.
They have 2.5-year-old twins, and we're going to hear all about it. So, welcome to our next episode of Hi, Husbands.
All right.
Hi, husbands.
Hi, husbands.
Hi.
Why, hello.
We're so happy to have you guys here. Tell us a little bit. So, you live currently in the DC area. Tell us about your kids. You have twins. How old are they? What are their names?
So our kids are 2.5 years old.
Uh-huh.
They actually turned 2.5 in, is it a week?
Yes.
Yeah, a week. And their names are Ava and Aiden. And they were born during the thick of the pandemic. And we went into the hospital. We got the phone call. It was 4:00 in the morning, flying over. We were living in Los Angeles at the time to Pasadena. And they came how many weeks early?
5 weeks.
5 weeks early.
And to be honest, we got a call. We missed the call because we slept through the call, and then we got a second call. Like, oh my god, they're coming!
They're really coming.
We gotta go.
So we made it. We got there in time. We didn't miss anything. But it was so crazy, as so many parents know, having babies during COVID. So we were able to get a room at the hospital, and they essentially were like, "Here are your babies," and closed the door. Like, now what? So that was the first that I've really spent a lot of times with any type of baby or newborn. So as we refer to it, as our baby boot camp, because we ended up staying in the hospital for a week because our son ended up having some breathing issues, being premature, and ended up getting transferred to the NICU. So we ended up being locked in that room. It was a nice room, but any room that you're stuck in for a week starts to get a little crazy. It got so bad that I got really jealous because they allowed Kevin out to go to the vending machine. And I was like so mad that he got out.
But wait, the nurses were coming in and checking on the babies and you, right? It wasn't that just were like, bye, right?
Yeah, but
it was really funny because it's like anything changing the kids' diapers, feeding them. They're like, we showed you once, now it's your turn.
Yeah.
Good luck. And then we did everything. What is interesting though is that because we were in there so long, and there's like a shift. I think the nurses shift over every 12 hours.
Uh-huh.
So we were there for like 6 days, 7 days. So we had 12 different approaches to swaddling our children, which made me feel better because I was like, oh, there's not one way to swaddle a kid. I can't really be doing it wrong if so many people have different ways. But it is really funny. Every single day, our nurse would be like, oh, you should really do it this way.
We were like,
for all the people confused about swaddling, there is no one way.
And by the way, it just made it 10 times more complicated because I started like combining it and arms were out and feet were hanging out. I don't know. I eventually got it.
Well, we only did like 2 days at the hospital.
And we had a similar experience. We had multiple different nurses, and everyone kind of did it differently. They all have those same size swaddles, but everyone's doing it totally different. Or the burping too. Sorry, guys.
Those rooms are not built for like 2 people to sleep in.
No,
it's so uncomfortable, right? I mean, maybe your room was better than ours, but we were just like,
I feel like our room was like as big as this office, which isn't very big, and we were just like,
like knocking into each other.
Yeah.
No, they were good to us. They gave us a nice room. Like we had a pretty big room.
So we were, for any parents out there, I definitely recommend talking to your support. I think the social services, what are they called?
Your social worker.
Social worker. Because we were at the Huntington Hospital in Los Angeles in Pasadena. That's where we were living the last 12 years. And we talked to our social worker, and she really helped us out. She got us I felt like it was the suite of hospital rooms. It was like 2 beds, a corner unit with like windows outside. It was pretty great. So I had a bed, he had a bed, and then our kids were right in front of us.
You sound like you want to go back.
I definitely know. But I was like, this is amazing. Except on day 3, I was like, oh my God. No matter how big that room is, there's always
Did you have your kids via gestational carrier, or was it or adoption? So you had through surrogacy. How was your relationship with your surrogate?
So she was just in the room right next to us. So we really didn't get to see her much because, again, they were being pretty strict about COVID protocols. But, after we came up with an agreement, after they were born, she was able to spend some time with them immediately. And then they brought them over to us. And then, she got to see them, throughout the time that we were there. So we kind of would allow her to have that time to, see them and, because it's, it's a long, process, and she's going through it too. And going through all sorts of emotions. We all are. And so we wanted to make sure she had that opportunity.
And we really feel lucky. I mean, I think any woman that will carry not one, but two kids at the same time is a really special person. So we definitely feel very grateful to her and kind of what she helped us be able to do. So today we have two beautiful kids. They're doing great. And, couldn't be any better.
In the
How about you guys? Did you guys do through adoption or surrogacy?
Surrogacy.
We did surrogacy also.
Surrogacy? What made you decide to do surrogacy versus adoption?
Well, we weighed a lot of different things.
And basically it all came down to, and I should really learn the name of this movie and I can never remember it, but
you saw a movie.
I saw this because we were looking into adoption forever and we always thought that would be our route. And then I saw this Molly Shannon movie. It was a drama. It's not a comedy, where she's actually a mother dying of cancer and she's laying on her deathbed and she's talking to her gay son and she just says, promise me that you'll come see your sister when I'm gone. When you do, you'll always see my face. And there's something about that just kind of like, it still makes me emotional. And I was like, we should try and have a baby through surrogacy. I think that would be really cool.
There were a lot of other things, but that
was like
nailed.
We're doing it. I was like, we're doing it. Let's go for it.
What about you? What was your decision behind surrogacy?
I mean, it was a really tough one. So I actually hosted a whole session on, surrogacy, adoption, and then different types of adoption. It's like international adoption. There's private adoption. There is foster to adopt. And I think after listening to all the different approaches, I think every person makes their own decision. I just felt like surrogacy was more right for what we were looking for. And I don't know, it felt also just more, is it horrible to say, it's like more straightforward. And there's, I know that the children will always feel wanted because, we have them for a purpose. So.
And I think we also had a very specific timeline that we wanted to follow. And I think in knowing some other gay parents who went particularly through the foster to adopt, and when we talked seriously about that as well, and just seeing some of how that could go another direction where it seems guaranteed to a certain point, and then all of a sudden the parent comes back in the picture and there's that direct familial relation. It's hard when you're going up and battling. And this was, my one friend had the child and was fairly, like, they had the child for a while at that point. And to have the child taken away, or even to have that as a possibility, it felt like there was more of a guarantee, even though there's issues, as we all know, with surrogacy, but you can really sort of plan that timing out. And we weren't getting any younger and we didn't want to push this timeline any further than necessary. So I think that was another factor that we took into thought too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a person with a really big heart to adopt and have to worry about that, the uncertainty for a while. So I definitely applaud those people.
I think it is interesting, the conversations that come up, and even comments people say so online, just about like, why wouldn't you adopt? And to your point, Kevin, it's like, it is a very personal decision and it's unique for each family. And I think for me, the biggest reason for me is I have a brother with special needs and it's a genetic disorder. It's sort of passed through the family, and having a brother with special needs growing up is really hard. Seeing my parents still take care of him at their age. And I want to say, like, if our kids needed us, we would be there for them. But if I could not have to do that again in my lifetime and experience, 18 years of living and experiencing the stress of that, I wanted to eliminate any possibility of that if we could, because it was tough. And so that was one of the factors for me in exploring that. You can't prevent everything, but it would just, if we could reduce the chances a little bit, surrogacy does kind of help do that, because you can do the genetic testing and you can do all of that. So I don't know, that was a factor for me. So it's interesting to talk about, because I think it is a very personal decision. And when somebody says, we've had people even in the gay community say, like, how could you not adopt, right?
And even like me personally, I remember more than 10 years ago, we have friends who had a baby through surrogacy. And I remember leaving dinner with them and saying to Brett, I don't know. If we're gonna have a baby, like I just want to adopt. That just seems like not. I don't even know what I would say, but I was against it. I was totally against it, and so it was definitely a journey for me. And I think everyone.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
But I didn't even want to get into all that because I wanted to talk about life now. Now that you have 2.5-year-olds, what do you?
Wait, how old is your? I should remember this.
9.5 months.
It'll be 10 months.
Oh my god, 10 months. Okay, perfect. And what made you decide to have 1 versus 2?
Because the doctor strongly recommended that he would only do 1 embryo at a time, and that's kind of like why we did it.
It increases the chances of it taking. Yeah, there's a greater risk with 2 of the pregnancy not taking. So
yeah,
we wanted to reduce that.
We just wanted it to be a surefire thing, and but nothing is surefire, But so then we also wanted to do the journey again. But also, I wanted to ask you how, especially in those early days, and then maybe now, did you have lots of discussions about what your roles are or were going to be as parents, and like how did you navigate, especially the early days? Like we were like tripping over each other just to change his diaper because we were both trying to do the same thing at the same time. So what kind of conversations or plans, or if any, did you have about who would do what, and like, did you have different days or different times, like especially when they were newborns?
I mean, I could jump in. I mean, I don't remember at all having those conversations going into it. But here's the thing. We definitely had a plan in place. But I also think we've been together for so long. We're coming up on our 18th year anniversary together that we're going to be celebrating this weekend. So I think we naturally knew what we were going to end up falling into. So we didn't discuss it at all. I think we ended up just launching into what came naturally to us. So for me, I'm much more, as we describe our relationship in any part, whether it's children or getting married or planning trips, I'm the creative director and you're the project manager. So I take on anything that's the fun part, maybe the creative part. And he takes on the boring, process-oriented paperwork that comes with it. So, for example, we knew the kids were coming. So I ended up, I don't even think we talked about it, but I knew that it was probably my responsibility to set up the nursery. I knew it was my part to make sure all the pieces were together and it was decorated well. When it came to food, definitely I would be the one cooking. And kind of the general cleanup. I'm so OCD when it comes to keeping things clean. So having twins certainly rocked my world in that direction. But I'm kind of crazy with the cleaning even still. And they're also obsessed with cleaning too. So I'm happy that I've instilled that in them. So one of their favorite things is to wipe off the counters and clean up, throw away trash, close doors. They walk around with brooms. So I think that worked. Would you describe it that way, Kev?
No, I would. A good example would be before the kids came, right? When you think about, what are the things that we should buy, right? This is a good example of how we would do this, right? I would be the one that did all the research and be like, okay, here are the 30 things that we need to put on our list to get. And then I would narrow it down to here are the 5 things. And I'd be like, for the creative stuff, here's the furniture. Phil, which of these things do you want? And he would decide which one he wanted to put on the list. So I basically would be and then in terms of timing, okay, we need to set up the room by this time. Phil, go figure out how to do that, right? And I read all the books on baby care stuff, and then I gave him the clip notes because that's my job, is to figure out how it all works and have a theory, and then bring him up to speed in the fastest way possible. Right. Mm-hmm. So that'd be kind of how we think about it. And then because we have 2 kids, to be very honest, you need both of us to change diapers. So we weren't tripping. We're more which one do you want to do?
Exactly.
I got that one. You got this one.
Which one do you have?
So it makes that more.
How did you come up with their names?
That was his job.
That was my job. And it's kind of ridiculous because our last names are very long and we decided to hyphenate our last names. And it's also the end of the alphabet. So we wanted to do something that was short at the front of the alphabet. So that was how we ended up coming up with it. And I think I was looking at different baby books and just kind of, coming up with a list. And then we kind of talked about which ones we liked, and we came up with, I would say, joint decision on both those names.
So this would be an example where he came up and gave me like the list of 10. And I was like, here's like my top 3. And I let him decide on the last. That's kind of how that worked.
All right. So your anniversary is coming up, and you have 2.5-year-old twins. Do you take date nights regularly? I know that you're going to be celebrating your anniversary. What have you done the past 2.5 years to keep the romance alive?
So I can, I guess, jump in, and then you can.
Phil's the fun maker, so he keeps our romance alive.
So we're so fortunate in moving. We were in LA for
12 years.
12 years, in California for 14 years. And part of the drive back to the East Coast to be back in DC is Kevin's parents are here. So that has been fantastic. So we have some help. So we're able to do stuff like this and get away and have that romantic night out. So we love going out and doing things. So we're just staying local. We're just going out to Northern Virginia. So we're not going to a tropical island, but it'll still be nice. But we usually we try to dedicate our Friday nights, since the very day that we started dating, to do something together as a couple, just to have that regular check-in to make sure that we're taking the time to work on each other. So our Friday nights have been movie nights. So we love to go out to the movies. So we will see, no matter if it's a great movie that we're excited about, or we're like coming up with a Lost and we're like, well, that'll do. So it's been kind of more than that scenario lately. But Friday night is our typical date night. But anyone who follows us at Adventuring Dads will see that we like to enjoy our date nights, and we'll go out to dinners here and there when we can. We've been trying to find, what we loved in LA was Korean spas. So we've been going to some of those in the Virginia area because there aren't any in DC, and just trying to find the unique things that DC offers. There were so many things in LA. There was no shortage of things, but it's fun to be in a new city and trying to find what else is out there.
I mean, that's the one thing that I love about Phil and why we've been so great together. It goes back to, I'm the practical one, making sure things will move forward with the kids, and whether it's school or like daycare or any of that type of stuff, or the doctors, but he'll be the one making sure that we're all having a good time, planning our trips and planning our fun, which I very much appreciate. So it's nice.
And Kevin generally agrees to every idea that I put forward. Even we went to this thing called the Office Experience pop-up, and he's never watched one episode of The Office. And I've kind of watched maybe like 2. So we were there with super fans, right? But it was something that was unique to DC, I thought. So we went. We probably didn't get as much as what everyone else going there actually got out of it, since we really didn't watch any of it, but we still had fun and we got some great photos out of it. So kind of doing things like that, trying to find the more unique things and having fun together.
Do you have help with the kids? Are there people nearby, or do you have a nanny? Like, how did you figure out how to support your life, especially because it sounds like you both work? So how do you balance work and life, and who helps you with that?
Maybe I can answer that one. So we have a lot of help. Like, my parents are here, and they are godsends, and I don't think we could, have our life without them. So I think they've always been there and helped to support us. So I think it's funny. I talk to people that are going to have kids, and I talk to them about what's your coverage going to look like. So is that going to be family that helps out? Is it going to be daycare? Is it going to be like a nanny? Is it going to be an au pair? And just figuring out what's going to happen. And that's kind of how we are approaching it right now.
Yeah, having a support system is so important, especially anyone that's in a relationship with 2 parents that have full-time jobs. I mean, that's enough to juggle on top of having kids and everything, and the pickups and just everything on top of that. So having that support system is how we were able to make it work. So that was one of the most important things that we prioritized going into this.
Was that a reason to move out of LA, was to have family nearby to help?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say, what's interesting is when we were in LA, because of the pandemic, our kids were born July of 2020, so we didn't have the same options that we thought we would have in terms of daycare. And my parents didn't see them until they were a year old or so, a year and a half old, right? And I think I just had this dawning point of view that just wasn't the type of life that I wanted for our family. I wanted them to know my parents and them to know each other, and as well as my brother and my sister-in-law and their kids, and his family's on the East Coast as well. Good example would be 2021 December. It was the first time we actually didn't see his family for one of the holidays in, I don't know, since we've been together in 18 years. And it's because we couldn't figure out how to get them the flight that was like one of the big flare-ups. And we're like, oh my God, we can't go on a flight. We can't drive across the country. It's just not going to work. And so the year before, we actually drove across the country and back over like a 6-week adventure. Amazing. Our kids have now been to 27 states out of 50 states because we've been driving all over this country during the pandemic. But it just wasn't sustainable doing that as kind of life was starting to return to normal.
Right. Oh my gosh. So many questions about making that happen with kids that young. That's incredible. I mean, we did a week in California with a 3-month-old, and I was exhausted.
But I feel like we just went and saw my family for Christmas, and he's older. I feel like at 3 and 4 months, it was actually really quite easy because all we did was hold him, and he would just be like falling asleep or eating or changing a diaper, and that was it. And now he's just like,
he wants to go over.
You know?
You could like set them down and have a coffee, and then make them back up.
Now he's like,
I'm like, oh God.
Now he's grabbing it and throwing it.
Yeah. You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. So today, I just realized that our son can now, like the safety locks that go on drawers, he has figured out how to open them. And so during his nap time, I walked in and he did not sleep. Instead, he was so excited to figure out how to open up and finally get into his closet and start taking out every single piece of clothing that was in there, as well as all the extra diapers. So I came in, all the drawers are on the ground, all the clothes are on the ground. I was like, oh my God, I guess we've hit an amazing milestone. So now I'm like, how do I teach my kids, don't do this? Once you figured it out, then the kids learn something, which is amazing, but then you have to figure things out. So I don't know. A good example would be when they figured out how to, our gates. They figured out our gates, I think 2 weeks after we moved to DC. And so we had all these gates protecting our stairs. And I was like, okay, now rather than actually them protecting, they become these vaulting things that they swing on and they're descending from it. Yeah. So I was like, well, I guess hopefully they're good at stairs now. Because we can't stop them. So that's what you get to look forward to as they get older, which is nice.
I'm curious, having come from LA, where it's extremely progressive in LA, I would say, and then coming to DC, which is probably still as a major city is pretty progressive, but there's Virginia, there's some areas surrounding it that maybe are a little bit less. And also with all your traveling, like going to 27 states with your kids, do you have any what I call gay dads in public stories where anyone has approached you or said anything or made it super awkward for you in a public setting?
I wouldn't say anything really bad. I feel like we've always gotten a lot because we really stand out when we roll in. We got twins, we have a double stroller, sometimes the dog is with us. There's no missing us when we walk in. And what I always find fascinating is it feels so obvious to us, especially in California. And we've had so many instances where someone will come up to us and be like, way to go. Dad's out. It's the dad's day. Letting the wives have the night off, or those type of moments. And we've gotten that multiple times. Or oh, you're letting the ladies stay at home today. Or there was a group of gay dads. We did a hike, and
we got two couples.
Four dads. Yeah,
four dads. Each of us has a child.
Yeah. And someone saw us, and that we were doing this kind of neighborhood hike. It was near the Hollywood sign, and someone saw us from their window it was the wife, and her husband was a photographer, and she's like, you need to find those dads and chase them down. So he literally got in his car and like found us on the hike. And I thought it was like this big guy, and he pulled out and he slammed on the brakes and he came running towards us. I was like, is he going to attack us? Like, what is happening? And he's like, oh, I just want to take your photo. And we're like, okay. And he explained he was a professional photographer. And this whole entire time, because it's within the context of being in LA and he's probably used to seeing gay dads, he's probably like, oh, this is a cool thing. There's a bunch of gay dads out. But then afterwards, we realized he's just like, you don't see like a bunch of dudes hanging out like this. And so again, he thought that we were a bunch of straight dads organizing this meetup when it was a bunch of gay dads, like couples, like hanging out.
That's very funny. We actually had a similar comment from a woman at the airport like a couple weeks ago. She was like, "You two did that alone? You brought the two dads brought the baby alone." But she didn't say dad. She said so. Anyways, yeah, we had a similar thing, and I was like, "What did she mean by that?" Like, and then I realized, oh, she thought we were two straight men somehow. Maybe one of us was connected. Anyways, what?
She's been watching too many movies.
Yeah. What? So, what kind of parenting style do you think that you have, or is there any sort of method that
or any resources
that you found that you love?
You can take that. The book that I recommend the most for any dad in their first 3 months, 6 months is The Happiest Baby on the Block. It is. Did you guys know about that book? You guys know, right? No. Oh my God! And your kids are 9 months old, or your son is 9 months old. Son, right?
Yeah, son.
Okay, so I think it's the best book ever, because when they were 3 to 6 months old, when they just like woke up and cried, and you're like, oh my God, how do I get them to be calm and go back to sleep or be happy? This was like the 5 amazing steps to get them to go to sleep or to be calm in like 20 seconds. It was the best. It was. Yeah. I highly recommend that book to anyone that I talk to or meet that are going to have children.
Right.
Well, and that was like number one.
And I just want to add, I actually read that book, but if you don't feel like reading it, you can also get the video and watch it how it's done. So it was a godsend. If they started screaming, I got it down. You swaddle, moving back and forth, and they were out. They were quiet. So anyone who's struggling with a screaming baby, especially those first 3 months, it's, you can't beat it. It's the way to get.
So that was like my favorite book. And then I think I read like 5 books about sleep training, because I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because that to me was so important, is how do I get them to sleep through the night in a quality way? And I think the best quote I got was, whatever you start now, you're going to have to continue to do. So make sure you really mean what you're going to do. And I think, so we were definitely the cried out type of parents, which I think for some parents is just not possible. But I was like, nope. Because after reading all these books, I was like, you know what? The best way to do this is let them cry it out now, so that later on when they're older, they'll be able to see through anything. And it's been working. We were just talking together the other day, and it was funny. I was going in and out of their bedroom last night at like 11 o'clock, and they were just passed out. They did not care that I was coming in and out. They got the sleeping thing down. It's like, this is amazing. Good. So now we're working on the food thing. That's the other thing, is about, I don't know. I'm very big about, I think I read this, my mom gave me this book on, I forget the name of it.
Bringing Up Baby?
Oh, what was it called?
Yeah. We read that. I listened to it.
I love that book. It's all about, but the key thing I took away from that one is about food and making sure they're exposed to lots of different types of food at all times, making sure they have fruits, vegetables, like some whole grains and like meat, but in lots of different varieties, lots of different ways. And if they don't eat something that day, I'm like, they'll eat more the next time. And it's just, I'm not as stressed about, they must be full, they're not eating everything. It's just kind of has helped me psychologically.
That's really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm curious, at this stage in the game, 18 years together, and now you have 2.5-year-olds, what have you learned or discovered about yourselves individually, and then maybe even as the light just shifted, right? It's super.
I know. I was trying to move a little.
I was like, what happens if we turn off the light? Will that be worse?
No, don't turn it off.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I think it's just about it just changes focus. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
What have you learned about yourselves as a couple or individually that you wish you had known before you got to this stage of parenthood?
I think what I learned is it can be very heightened in the moment, things that seem so stressful, they really aren't. And it's sort of when you give yourself some time to just kind of take a deep breath and, it's all going to be fine. Or I think any new parent is so scared about doing the wrong thing, or maybe I didn't do this right. Maybe I should have changed the baby earlier. Like, we're all figuring it out as it goes along the way. So try not to beat yourself up throughout the process, because, many parents, this might be your first time having a baby, or even the second time. There's, things change, and what you thought you knew the first time around might not apply the second time. So just to, keep an open mind and try not to be so hard on yourself if things aren't going the way that you perfectly have in your mind of how it's going to play out.
That's good advice.
And I need that.
Yeah.
And I think your question was what do we learn about ourselves? What's interesting is one of the things I realized about myself is I'm more of a perfectionist. I like getting things done and getting them done well and right. And with just me and him, I'm oh, we can do it right. But I realized with kids, it's literally impossible. You're okay, well, I guess today, this is, I guess, good enough for today. So we'll have to move on from this. You know what I mean? Because in your head, I don't know, you just think, oh, everything's going to be perfect. But then there's days where you're your kids are just crying, or in our case, we have twins. One's crying, the other one's fine. And then an hour later, they switch. And they just switch off. You're oh my God, will you not align and be happy together? And it's just being trying to figure out how to have that space and it being okay and not being a perfect parent. So I don't know if you've had that experience where you talk to other parents, you're oh my God, you're doing this and that. I'm maybe I should be doing that. And I realize in some ways, I'm oh my God, I don't actually want to know what you're doing, because that might stress me out more. I'll just stay with what I'm doing. So.
Yeah. I feel I think I have to get over the fact that every time somebody's telling me something or anything, it feels like personally attacking me. Do you know what I mean?
It's
trying to tell me, they're trying to tell me what I should be doing, and instead of just letting it kind of roll off, I'm
I think it's interesting too. I think that first 2 years, we're still in the first year, and I would imagine that now that they're starting to be more socialized with schools and maybe, just seeing more kids, that you're being around other parents more. We've been so isolated, really, that I haven't really felt any pressure to do anything except just be what Maverick needs. But it is interesting as we start to talk to other parents, or we go into situations, we're well, my kid's doing this. You're oh, my kid's not doing that yet. Right. Maybe I'm not there, or the opposite, my kid's never doing that.
Yeah, or guess what? I don't care.
Yeah.
And I could see Kevin looking at me, because when you're talking about what you're talking to other parents, because I still can think back, we're at a party, and I don't even know if the kids were a year yet. And Kevin took it to such heart, because when we were talking to the parents, they're so you haven't started looking into schools yet? And I'm and they're you need to get on it. And he's we're so far behind. I'm they're not even one.
Right.
I think we have a little bit of time.
No, yeah, right. And especially I would think in DC too, everyone's well, do you want them to get into this college? Then you need to get them into this daycare. It's what? Yeah.
It's funny that you're mentioning that, because we actually went to our first open house last night for pre-K 3 schools. And let's just say there's a lottery system. So you basically have to choose 12 different schools and the order. And I feel all this pressure to be oh my God, is the school I'm choosing for my 3-year-old going to be enough? And it feels very good at being 3, it's just 3. It doesn't have to be the perfect one. Mm-hmm. And so we're yeah, so I'm trying to rein in my expectations, because every school has their score, and I'm and then I think, how am I going to get our kids there? I was great, they got in the best school possible, and it takes me an hour to get over to that school and get back. I'm it's going to be horrible. So I'm definitely checking I should say it's a work in progress. I'm trying to check that expectation to be what's a good balance of actually doable in our life, but good for the kids. And I don't know. It's hard.
So what's your next family adventure?
Yeah.
Next family adventure? Well, I don't know. Your parents and your family are coming over. Kevin's parents.
Oh, actually, that's true. So we're going to be having so my brother and sister-in-law live in the city, but we were able to celebrate Christmas with them because we were actually in Florida with his family. And so in about a week or so, we're going to have my parents over as well as my brother, sister-in-law, and their 2 kids to have kind of a late sharing of Christmas gifts.
It was supposed to happen a lot earlier, but then after the holidays, our kids ended up getting sick. And then someone in the family got COVID. So it was this whole thing where I had the tree up until like I kept like, okay, it's just going to be another week later. So the Christmas tree was out, the stockings were up. And I'm like, you know what? We just need to take it down. It's going to be February and everyone's going to be like, why? But it goes back to, it's like, why should we care what other people are saying? But it felt a little ridiculous. I mean, if we don't take it down, it's just going to stay up the rest of the year. So.
Actually, you know what? That's the best thing actually about being a gay dad or parent. I was thinking when we got married, right? If you're in a straight couple, it's like there are these predefined things that you're supposed to do, right? Which is, which as a gay couple, we're like, screw that. We don't have to worry about those things. And we're able to be very, I would say, innovative, or I should say, Phil could be very innovative to figure out what we were going to do with our wedding. And I feel like the same thing with kids, right? Because I think, a lot of straight parents, I think a lot falls on the woman. And there's no woman in this relationship, right? So we have to talk every day about who does what, And it's really funny because I've talked to people like, who's the woman in the relationship? Who's the mom? I'm like, oh my God, that is just...
I know, that drives me nuts when that happens. Yeah. And I can think of another funny story. It's not about, childcare, but it's sort of about being a gay couple. And I think back to when Kevin was in business school and I was the partner, and they called anyone, whether you were, straight couple or gay, it was the partners club. And I wanted access to the gym, and they had very strict rules about, and this is a while ago. So gay marriage wasn't recognized. We weren't married at that point. And so when I went there, they said, oh, we need to see, you have to be officially married. And I was like, well, I'm gay. And he's like, and it was a straight guy, and I could tell he was so awkward. He's like, well, or you could just tell me. You could just say you're gay. So here's your... So it's like, you can create the rules. I'm like, I'm okay, since like, there aren't sort of these expectations of, what it should be as a straight couple. And so that was
I also feel like, something sort of leaning into that too that I've noticed is like the blanket parenting, like, and you're saying this in the roles in the relationship, but I also think the style of relationship to your kids, that there's a lot of people saying, well, babies do this, babies do that. But it's like, no, my babies are individual people. So they're all going to do something different. So you can't just give me this blanket advice, because Maverick may not want to do that, may not do that, right? And I think it's interesting to hear you talk about that, because that's something I say to Stephen a lot. I was like, why do we feel like we have to parent our kids as gay couples the way our parents parented or the way other people parent, when it's like you're saying, like the beauty of being a same-sex couple and a two-dad family is that we can create a family system that we want, that we want our child to have. And I see that you're both doing that. It's just so inspiring, and it's really, really beautiful to watch. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you for having us on. It's been so fun talking to you guys.
Yeah. Sorry about the lights and us, all of our tangents.
Oh, please.
Hopefully we got the questions you wanted to talk about.
I have Slack too. It drives me nuts sometimes.
I know. I was trying to turn off the notifications.
Oh, it drives me nuts.
Yep.
Oh, there it is then.
There it is again. On that note, it was so nice to meet you guys. Everyone can come follow you at Adventuring Dads on Instagram. Where else are you?
Instagram's our main place.
That's our main place. All right, so we'll put
that.
We
have a website as well. So
we have a website too.
So adventuredads.com.
And we'll come see you in DC, and we'll all hang out.
That'd be great. I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait until it's better weather.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
We hope you enjoyed our interview with Kevin and Phil, the adventuring husbands.
Make sure you subscribe to this channel and leave a comment down below. Let us know who else you'd like us to interview, and any specific questions you'd like to know about what it's like to be a two-dad family. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye, husband.